Welcome to the Behavioral View, presented by CentralReach. Join hosts, Dr. Shannon Hill and Dr. Nissa Van Etten, as they explore cutting-edge topics in behavior analysis with expert guests. Stay informed, stay inspired. This is the Behavioral View.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Behavioral View, where this episode we are we're titling it "What Now?" and we're going to take on all of the occurrences that have been happening with DEI changes in the field of applied behavior analysis. I'm Shannon Hill, the editor-in-chief here at CentralReach. I am, as always, here with my boss, Nissa. You want to say hello?
Hey everyone, Nissa and Trotman Van Etten. I'm the Director of Clinical Training and CR Institute here at CentralReach.
And we're really thrilled to be introducing our newest team member at CR Institute. Hi, Elizabeth. Would you like to introduce yourself and tell them what we're looking for?
So I am an AI clinical solutions architect at CentralReach, and I'm really excited to be here to chat about such an important topic.
Great. Oh, we need your whole name, please.
Oh, Elizabeth Jordan.
And our guests today are two amazing human beings who are working in leadership in Black men in behavior analysis. So I will let you guys introduce yourselves so that I don't mangle any names or job titles.
Hey guys, thanks again for having us. My name is Jeron Trotman. I'm a board certified behavior analyst. I'm the president and founder of Black Men in Behavior Analysis, also known as BMBA. Been in the field almost 15 years now and do a lot of work focusing on building inclusive systems, mentorship, culturally responsive spaces for behavior analysts, especially for those who don't often see themselves reflected in the field. So thank you for having us here today.
Love it.
It's really hard to follow that, Jeron. My name is Deterrence, and I am a member of Black Men in Behavior Analysis. And what I've found is I just enjoy doing the work. I'm a practitioner by trade, and I enjoy being able to have real detailed conversations about stuff that is meaningful to me. And so I'm happy to be here.
Well, we like to start things off with what we call the question of the day, which sometimes is silly and sometimes is relevant, but I thought maybe we would go relevant this time. And curious what people on this panel do when highly frustrating things keep happening. How do you maintain your center and your focus and your perspective?
I garden. Sorry, I just have to step outside. That's my thing. Get outside.
I would say for me, it really helps me to just take some deep breaths and stay grounded in my values. That really, if I can just go back to my values, that really helps me because I don't always have to agree with every opinion that comes my way. But I do need to be able to listen, and I do need to be able to not be defensive in some instances. So if I can kind of go back to my values, I try to ask myself, what's the bigger picture here? And that really helps me. So practically speaking, I lean on my community. The Deterrence, you're one of them. I lean on my community. I'm big in community. So I don't have to carry every idea alone. So check in with my mentors, check in with my peers, check in with my friends, and that really helps me.
Mine's very easy. I have a couple of bad vices, but for those times that I can't use bad vices, I'm a dad. I'm a husband. I am a human outside of behavior analysis, and I know that I will have crappy days. But outside of my crappy days, my faith in my belief in that there are more good human beings out there than not allows me to make better decisions. And I think that for all those things that I realize, if you could see my kids, you would know like that is so much more powerful or so much more a motivator than any cigar or tequila or anything of that nature.
Those are great answers. I think everyone listening knows I pick up a barbell. I work out. I take it, I CrossFit, I go running. I read. So, ever since this all came out, I've got a ton of books that I've ordered. I reread some of the things that keep me grounded, again, in believing that there are great humans out there. There are great humans that have spread their word, that have shared with us the knowledge that we can get past this. So I really do love to lean into literature and finding ways to base myself in history that has helped us move forward, knowing that we could be moving back. So yeah, I need to get it all out. So I go for a good run. I cry on my run. I listen to really loud rap so much that I can't think. And then I lift some weights, and then I get to reading to figure out what we can do next.
You know what? I would never guess that you powerlift.
I CrossFit. So.
Oh, okay. I was gonna say,
She does it all.
okay.
She could take us all on if she needed to.
Nah,
Deterrence.
she works out, bro. You gotta follow her on the socials.
Yeah.
Whole family's fit.
Our whole family works out. Yep.
Oh, I'm in the gym now. I'm trying to enjoy it.
It's hard to enjoy. I do a little bit of everything that you guys say, but in a moderated version. So I'm outside and I'm exercising, but mostly it revolves around my dog needing to be walked, in which I became addicted to long outdoor times. But really, for me, it has more to do with this is up for debate whether I was actually going to die when this thing happened. But for me, it was a near-death experience when I was in my 20s. And everything about my whole life perspective changed in that 3 to 5 minutes. And I now just have this working philosophy of life that everything's temporary, including me, including this moment, including anything that's upset me or anything that's giving me a great thrill right now. It's going to come and it's going to go. And at the end of my life, I want to be able to look back and think, I threw myself into the things that were important to me, but I also didn't spend my whole life so angry and mad and fighting that I missed all that beauty that you were talking about, Deterrence.
You know, the one thing that I really relish in, I had a mentor, and he would always ask about what would you want on your headstone? And I would want to say, here lies a good man, right? Just a good person. And so I think that is such a motivator. And when you realize all of it's temporary, it puts so many things in perspective.
All right. So, well, let's just go ahead and pivot to the reason that we're all gathered here together. And people who watch the Behavioral View know probably by now that we're winging it through most of this, but we do start out with a list of questions. And this time, for the first time ever, I'm actually going to read the first question I wrote because I want to make sure that I get it exactly right, put a lot of energy and effort into this one. So our opening question is this. After the release of the newsletter in March of 2025, the ABA community replied with great emotion. And the BACB leadership has now given a talk at APBA, and they've released a podcast about the decision to pull back the continuing education requirements for DEI content. So I would love to hear what you all are all thinking about that and feeling about that decision itself, and basically the process by which it was derived and the reasons that it was made. Who wants to take that one on first?
I can kick us off.
Yeah, go ahead, Nis.
I think we were all in the same room right after, I think just a few days after the BACB had made that announcement, and we were at the APBA conference kind of speaking on a very similar topic as we were talking about today. And I think it's been some time, so it's helpful that time has passed. I think we all are, many of us in this world know that time heals a lot of the wounds that might be fresh. On a Monday, this announcement is made, and then on Friday, we gathered to kind of talk about how to bring culturally responsive practices into behavior analysis. And even with time that has passed, I'm still frustrated, I think, just from my own personal perspective in this field, which I feel like I've given all of myself to. Have been in the field since I was a teenager. I really haven't done anything else professionally. And even thinking back to the panel we were on at APBA talking about, Dr. Anita Lee said, it's like you are playing sports and your coach is there the whole trajectory of your professional career. And then all of a sudden, when you feel like your coach is there and you need them the most, the coach steps away. So I think even with the podcast and watching the world through LinkedIn and all of the social media platforms, because while we know we are professionals and those aren't the best ways to interact, that is the way that we can interact because we don't all get to work in shared space and conferences are far and few between. So I'm still frustrated. I'm still emotionally impacted, but I still vow to continue working in this space and speaking up and making sure that I speak on behalf of my colleagues who maybe wouldn't speak up in terms of how this has impacted me in my own career and my own view of the BACB and their decision.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And I appreciate this conversation. Just to echo your sentiments, when we had that panel at APBA, it was still very fresh. And I know there was a lot of frustration. One thing I appreciated about being in that room was hearing so many perspectives and just hear what everybody valued. And I'm not gonna lie, when the newsletter dropped, it was a gut punch. It was really a gut punch. For many of us that had been committed to DEI and been doing the work, it was disappointing. I wouldn't say just because of the outcome, but I would say it's how the decision was made. That's kind of what I kind of get back to. And I want to be clear. I've listened to the podcast. We were at PBA, so I do understand somewhat the legal and funding pressures that the BACB is facing, and those are very real, especially in a climate where DEI is being politicized, both federally and at the state level, which has been acknowledged many times. But I felt like the rollout really lacked transparency, and it didn't reflect the collaboration that I felt the momentum we've been building in our field, right? So the community involvement that this field is capable of, I think it just didn't happen. I just really kind of felt like it was a gut punch, and I feel like our field has been moving forward. And I appreciate the podcast. I appreciate the honesty. Even, the board even came out and said they weren't happy with making that decision, which I appreciate. I appreciate that. I don't take that lightly at all, but at the same time, I think leadership requires reflection. And as I'm reflecting on this as we're moving forward, it means we have to create these opportunities to have more input in conversations like this.
Yeah, I think very similarly, the gut punch feeling, right? Like when you have all the air knocked out of you and you kind of, but like from my years of wrestling, what I've known is when you get those gut punches, there are opportunities for you to kind of refocus yourself. And just like a good fighter, you want to get back in a good stance. Remember, you're still fighting. And that in itself sets the stage for you to kind of look at what actions follows next, right? So, and even from the board statement, I can understand the pressures that they have to protect stakeholders, and they also have to protect consumers as well. And so, I think the bigger thing is, where do you apply the pressure now? Like, where do you apply your energy and efforts? Because a lot of us are working, a lot of us are doing the work internally in the field, but are we putting all our energy and effort into the appropriate places? So like, are we looking at educational institutions? Are we looking at how individuals are selecting service recipients from their wait list? All of those things are vital roles in how we become a more inclusive field, right? And I think the inclusiveness starts with not only the analysts, but the training of those analysts and the training of those RBTs and the training of those BCABAs. Because a lot of times you have a bad experience with a behavior analyst and it sticks with you. And it sticks with you because those individuals hadn't had experiences outside of their community.
Mm-hmm. And I want to piggyback really quick off that, Deterrence. I would say one thing that I really was proud of, I think that made me feel good in an aspect, was so many people reached out to me and they were kind of confused. They were upset. They didn't know what it meant for their work. But it really did show you that emotional response did show me how much our field cares though, right? Like we care about the work that we're doing, and to see how many people were just like felt that gut wrenching feeling and had that response made me know that people do care about this work that we're doing. And to your point, we have to continue to do that work.
And you know what I think is also to kind of like reframe it and reshape it. Like you can look at any picture and say like, oh, that's pretty shitty, or you can look at it and say like, oh, if we move the shit this way, but if we move it proverbially a little bit, then it's a better picture. And you don't have to smell it when it's a picture, right? When you move the things in the right thing. See, Shannon, I know it was coming.
You're here for the color commentary. I mean, we want it. It's fine. It's fine.
I can visualize it better because you use that.
There you go.
But a lot of times when we're stepping inside of a social science, we forget from the perspective that we're taking that we're in a social science. And it means that we have to deal with social issues like how politics impacts our science, how it impacts our daily. And honestly, you know, coming from a space of being being a Southern male Black BCBA, all of those contextual values, like, oh wow, those are some anomalies there, and we're steady trying to become inclusive. But give me the tools to be able to do those things inside of my community and outside of my community as well.
So when I heard the BACB, when I heard that a decision had been made to remove that, I cried. And at least that was my initial response. And then I was really angry. But initially I was just really disappointed and sad because there's so many things that are going backwards right now. We're taking so many steps backwards, and as quickly as these things are moving backwards, it's going to take much longer to put them back in place. And that is really devastating, I think, to really think about how much work was put into improving everyone's living experience, everyone's ability to thrive and be successful and to, live a quality life. And it's going to take a very long time to get back to even where we were, which still needed so much work. Right? Needed so much work, which is why, we have, these organizations putting in so much effort and work to educate communities, to create training content. And we all agreed and I think moved forward with a lot of excitement. Generally, I think at least our industry, in really rallying to create a lot of content and to make that DEI CEU a requirement. There was clearly enough there. Everyone was in agreement that it was necessary to do this. And I think there was a lot of support for it. And yet 12 subject matter experts and little discussion and some obvious political things have maybe played in. It just seems like there wasn't much of a discussion or discourse amongst people in the community. This kind of, at least as far as I'm concerned, I want to say I was blindsided, but at the same time, it's not the first time.
You learn to expect it after a while. Yep. So there's this, when you've been punched a few times, it's like, oh, okay. I mean,
what's next? And I was really hoping that the BACB would be rallying behind.
Yeah.
But you know what? In healthcare, right? Particularly in this, just kind of, Elizabeth, as you were talking, it brought me to the state of my wife going through her third pregnancy. And it was for me being a supportive spouse. She was with a provider that was not culturally responsive to her needs. We literally, I'm going through this experience and I'm like, this is horrible. And like, as a person that is not trained in medicine whatsoever in that particular field, I felt so helpless. I honestly remember they sent my wife home and it was apparent that she was in labor. It was apparent that this was a pretty bad experience. And so they said, go home, you're fine. And we made it to my home. And less than 10 minutes later, I am like hauling behind down the highway, trying to, and literally about to go into labor in our car.
Yeah.
And I was like, this could have been prevented. And I think that this experience required me to call an ambulance to then take my wife back to the hospital. And this was tough. And imagine if we take that same concept and what that experience looks like in ABA, where people are just not responsive.
Yeah.
I feel like you guys just really did a great job of mapping out all the different places that I was hoping that this talk would go into. I want to start with piggybacking on something Jeron said, that the process was part and a large part of the outcry, right? So I'm curious if we could rewind all of this, and the BACB had, instead of dropping it as just as a newsletter article, if they had come out ahead of the game and said, hey, constituency, we have a problem, and here's the problem, what would you have had them do differently? Or what would you have wanted to happen instead of the way that it did, process-wise?
I have a couple of thoughts there. If I had a seat at the table, I would have liked to pause, and I would like to invite the community in. I think instead of a newsletter announcement being a final decision, I would have felt better if we, got a message saying, hey, this is what we're up against as a field, right? Let's figure this out together. Let's try to figure this out together. I think even if we came to that same outcome, that kind of transparency builds trust. So it would have made a space for maybe us to be creative. I truly believe we could find different paths. We're BA analysts. We try to, get rid of barriers. That's what we do. We try to find out the why, even with the legal aspects, we have that alignment in values. So I do understand that DEI is under attack politically, to your point, deterrence. But I still think there's a way we can center culture responsive care and reframe it. And I would say the reality is we don't need that label DEI to do the work. If I'm being honest with you, we've been doing the work. But I would have liked to see us pause and invite some of the community in before a decision like this would be made. So that would have been my advice. So let's do that first, even if we do have these legal ramifications, which have been stated on numerous occasions, which I understand. I think people would have felt better about it.
And I would even add, like, when we talk about transparency, and a lot of times in organizations, you can see where, I don't want to cause alarm immediately, right? I know that something is glooming over the course of time, but it may be something that we may not have to address for 10 more years. And so it seemed that there was maybe a shift that this is a state of an emergency for them in that particular moment. However, I do say this. I think that the process of this being on the horizon maybe should have been, more opportunities to give different segments prior to on the podcast. That would have been a good coffee with the board of directors, coffee with individuals that may have decision-making powers. Mm-hmm. Sometimes when we're in a position of power, it is hard to imagine how, when your decision is going to impact someone that doesn't have the power to change how they're represented, nor do they have the power to change how they participate in this system of service.
Mm.
I think that, I think I can echo both sentiments, saying I agree. There should have been more transparency in the way that this was done. I think in the days that have passed, a lot of questions came up about who are those 12 SMEs, who were the individuals that unanimously, nobody disagreed. And again, none of us were present and in the room, and there are a lot of decisions that were made on behalf of certificants. And we know that, for the thousands of us that carry the certification, this is our livelihood. This is the work that we're doing, that we hope, like I said, I've been doing since I was young, that we hope to do until we retire. And that is not something we wanted to jeopardize. But I think the transparency component of, And Jeron, to your point of we're all doing the work, I know for a woman who's also a minority, I've been doing the work since I was born. That's just the work that this is what I was born into. I have to do the work. I think the part that is hard are my colleagues that, they can disregard it. I'm not thinking about it. I don't have to worry about the term DEI or these terms because it doesn't come to my doorstep. Those are the colleagues that I think that, 3 years ago when they put these requirements into place, those are the colleagues that needed to consider it, that, walk into different spaces and different homes and might need more of that training. I think we have a long path ahead. I think that there are a lot of variables that are contributing to this decision, and the emotions are still real, and I don't think they will go away. I think the podcast from the board was a Band-Aid to just say, hey, we understand that we've harmed and maybe hurt our community, but we're going to release a 10-minute update, let you know that we didn't want to do what we had to do, but we did it, and we were up against a number of contingencies we couldn't control. And it feels almost like a Band-Aid on an injury that's going to keep being reopened. I feel like the field will continue to grapple with it. I'm still teaching a course right now, and the entire course is on culturally responsive care for master's level students. And it's a really hard time to talk about these topics, knowing that in a year it might be removed from a lot of university programs.
And the thing that resonates with me is that a lot of the times when we talk about, if we look at from that APBA talk, when we started looking at the distribution of diversity among RBTs, ABAs, and BCBAs, and just general people that are vested in the field, you will see a large percentage of individuals of certain ethnic backgrounds identified in the RBT category. And then as you get more and more degrees, or you get more and more requirements, it becomes very hard. And then you look in situations where you may have individuals that are coming from a place of power, as supervisor, as you're over this individual's program. Mm-hmm. And you're supervising someone that doesn't look like you, that may come from a different walk of life. And now you're saying things that are very offensive. Yep. And not to say that 5 hours of CEUs is going to make you a better practitioner, but at least exposure and the encouragement to make better decisions are there. And I think that's what the community at large wants, is better decision making for individuals that come from a small nook and cranny of the world. Man, I don't know how I got that one in there.
It's pretty good.
Something that I think was very troubling for me in hearing, the decision to remove DEI as a required course, or CEU requirement. Let me correct myself there. Just the fact that given our field, right, we at our very core, right, one of the core principles is socially significant behaviors, right? Mm-hmm. So I given what we do, it's so fundamental to, our core is really about setting the stage for, the field of mental health and healthcare, to be able to say that what we need to be doing needs to be making a impact on the individuals that we serve. Well, how do we define what that impact? How do we ensure that that positive impact is truly positive, right? Nessa, I think you mentioned, there's safety concerns. There's just the things that we do day to day that we, unconscious bias can ultimately, influence how we define what is significant, what is how things should be. And the reality is that we need to be humble, and that we need to be speaking with the families that we serve to understand what is true quality of life in their living environment, right? We're entering people's homes.
Let me stop for just a second and do a secret word for our CEU seekers. I think we'll go with transparency for our first secret word. Transparency. All right. You guys are already throwing out some good ideas in terms of, it's been done. We're not going to be able to erase it. What are we going to do to continue to move forward? And we represent a lot of different roles just in these little squares that I'm looking at right now. So from all of these different perspectives, whether it is deterrence, the university programs, or if it's the organizations, NISA for you and me, it's the training, and then Jeron and Deterrence coming from an organization that's dedicated to this mission. It doesn't mean just because they took away some requirements, it certainly doesn't mean that we're not going to continue doing the work. So how are we going to keep doing the work despite all of this?
I definitely think that you really have to start looking at and I'm a big proponent of where I spend my money is where I'm celebrated at, right? What organizations match my values, or which organizations' missions are in line. And I think that what I could get from the podcast and the APPA talk was, this may not be our role to make political statements and political and be in that political canon, but these organizations may have the ability to leverage what they do in order to make more meaningful change. Yeah. And so, like, what organizations are you going? And I think this is the thing, and I guess coming from the part of the world that I'm in which behavior analysts may not necessarily have, understood when their legislation were put in place how to leverage your skill set in the political arena, right? How do you talk to your representative? And I think if we were to replay it back and we said, like, hey, it's 2 months, 2 years before we have to make this decision. These are the 3 states that are being like really tough about letting the DEI components be on their roster. Can we go have these conversations with these particular representatives? And I think that would be a opportunity to make some real meaningful change, because you're now not allowing the barrier to say, well, we can't, change any part of how we do business. Sorry, that was a little lengthy.
I was just going to ask, for behavior analysts who want to do that but don't have any idea how, where can they go? Do you guys have any guidance on how do you learn that skill set? Because it's very different from what you might expect it to be, right? You don't just walk in or make a call and say, this is what I want. Organized effort tends to work out better.
State has their own. I know here in Texas, they have a whole workflow and a task analysis if you want to get involved, like what you can say, who to reach out to, how you can join them. That was something I definitely did at that last conference, was go right up to the table for the state of Texas and say, I need to get more involved. I'm 20 minutes from the Capitol, and they said, go online, look at the task analysis, send us your email, and we'll coach you through it before you even start the conversations.
And then looking at and I think that many state organizations do a really good job of this, particularly, I think in my area, Tennessee, the Tennessee Association, they leveraged and they were able to get lobbyists on, just by them being able to network and pull their resources together. So I think you start looking at the state organizations and what they can do, because they're going to know the politicians in that area. They're going to know, a lot of states will have like day on the Hill or Capitol meetings. And are we just using those to bring awareness, or are we using it to leverage to actually have conversations?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good point, Deterrence. And at that state level is important as well. I'm the VP of DEI for GABA, which is the Georgia Association for Behavior Analysts, and we're doing some of that work right now. And to answer that question directly, Shannon, I would say, because I'm not going to lie to you guys, I'm sitting with this one the most, like when it comes to how do we move forward, because to Nisa's point, this does now, like, you're not required now to have to do the work. And there is a specific population of people, which you referenced, that now aren't going to come into contact with those contingencies. So, Deterrence, even to your point, where you're celebrated, I do agree with that. But I can't tell you how many talks I've done where people who maybe haven't come into contact with someone like me and have learned so much, and now that opportunity is not being prompted, if you will. That's a real concern, because now you're not coming into contact with that. And sometimes when you come into contact, you're like, oh, I had no idea. I didn't have no idea. So that's a concern. But the answer is we continue to build. the BACB's decision doesn't change. It changes the rules, but it doesn't change our responsibility as behavior analysts, right? So, for instance, Deterrence, you notice at BNBA, we're still embedded DEI to everything that we do, whether it's mentorship, leadership development, the way we show up in our community. We're not asking for permission to lead with integrity because we're already doing that work. We don't have to ask for that permission.
That sentence.
Yeah.
I just want to let that one get get its due. That was a great sentence.
Yeah, it is because we don't have to ask for that permission. And to be honest, I think this moment in time right here really separates the performative from purposeful. All right, because your commitment to DI, if your commitment to DI only existed before, or it was easier required, it was never really real to begin with. So I would challenge our listeners, everybody that's listening, all our practitioners now, to ask themselves, what do I stand for? And just let that sit with yourself. Like, what do I stand for? And how do I lead when the framework is no longer provided for me? Because we don't need a checkbox. We don't need a checkbox to tell us what's right. We don't. So I think everybody who's listening, those are questions we have to ask ourselves and then see where our values are aligned. Because that's important. And it's important to do that right now in a time where these things are happening.
I would also say, just as important as you asking yourself the questions, I think cultivating a network that is going to ask you, or nudge you when your perspective may be a little bit more condemning than others, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I've had some conversations with people, as they would say in politics, across the aisle, that would say, it's really not important. Like, I don't know, like, I don't feel that there should be a DEI component. It doesn't, impact the way I do work. I work in this really, really, really centered environment where a lot of the people culturally look like me, have the same values. And so, I mean, it's not like I'm going to California where I'm going to have to kind of be a little bit more liberal in nature. And so I do think that having that network does become a educational value as well, right? And having people that will push back and say stuff like Shannon will say, well, why do you think that? Well, I don't know. And so those aha moments come from your network as well.
Mm-hmm.
100%. Yeah, as white people go, I think I tend to be more socially progressive than many people around me. But at the same time, just as an example of what you're saying, Deterrence, it is going to be way easier for me to stay in contact with and align my behavior with what I value if my network is diverse, if I am staying in contact with what is happening to people, if I'm hearing your personal stories of what is happening to you when you walk into someone's house or you walk into an organization, because it's so easy for me to be blind to it because I am not the one that is experiencing it on a daily basis.
I want to pause for a minute, Shannon. First of all, I appreciate you communicating that to the listeners because it needs to be said. And you're right. If you don't come into contact, if you're not hearing that, it's so easy to just, have your head down, kind of go up your daily, look at, your routine. And so it is beneficial. It is valuable to have a prompt, a network, a space where you are coming into contact, that you are hearing those things and you are seeing those things. So I appreciate you sharing that point, especially from your perspective as well. So thank you.
They say justice has to be blind, right? And as practitioners, you would hope that we are not like peeking over the veil to make decisions without like any type of cultural context. But a lot of times, until you're trained to be able to look at the entire picture, a lot of times you have a very narrow view. And I think that's just us operating in a social society as well.
Let's go ahead and do secret word number 2. Let's call that one integrity. Integrity. We've been through our emotions about the newsletter and tips and suggestions for what we're going to do to move forward anyway. So I think I was about to direct us into the specific agenda of Black men in behavior analysis. So, Jeron and Deterrence, what's going to go on now? I am sure Black men in behavior analysis organization has got an agenda, and maybe you want to share some pieces of that in ways that you guys are trying to reach out and make a difference, and anything that others can do to join in and support any of that.
Yeah, thank you, Shannon. I appreciate the platform and the opportunity to share with your listeners. A lot of our work has remained the same. We put out a statement. We've been talking to our community. We've been talking to our members, but we have created some additional layers to some things that we've been doing, and we're going to be embedded into our summit, which is our annual conference that's going to be happening in September, with our series that we lead for our DEI talks and our mentorship as well. One thing that we've started immediately doing is doing more partnerships with organizations and doing more talks with them centered around this work, centered around the things that are necessary to talk about. And we've kind of just upped that, doubled that, because we feel like the more that we can come in contact with allies, and I like to call accomplices, which is a step above allyship to talk about, the more we can, in this conversation that we've had, come into contact and have those talks to collaborate, to put out things. So that's one thing that we've been really intentional about with organizations like Behavior University, which shout out to them. They're really helping elevate our voices in that way as well. Behavior Live, those kind of things. So that's one thing that we're doing. We've been taking a look at what we're doing and changing some things around for our summit as well. So our summit is going to be September 4th through 6th. And we're having some talks surrounding these issues, these statements, all these things that we've been talking about, and being really intentional about how that looks. All the way starting at our student level, we've been really planning and enhancing what that looks like for them as well, up to our BCBA level. So we've also included this in our mentorship program. So Empower BA, which is our mentorship program, has been really intentional and relational and kind of really powerful in that creating a space where we can have these discussions to enhance that as well. So we're working on a few projects within the organization. Obviously, our leadership team is as well. And we've just really been proud of just these small nuggets that we're doing to kind of do our part and type of, the bigger picture to kind of lead from our organizational standpoint, to kind of face in some of these challenges and kind of really put down where our values align. I know you want to piggyback off that, DT.
That was a drop the mic minute. But I can only talk about the experience from being a part of the organization, to have a network that you can now say, like, you know what, this newsletter was a tough read, and it was a tough digest. And so having other individuals that understand some of the cultural values is so important. It's so important to be able to have those discussions within your community, so that when you have to come outside of your community to have a dialogue. And I think that what our organization has done a great job is not only insulating those individuals that are from that community that look like us, but also empowering them to be able to process those feelings, thoughts, and emotions, so that we don't have like a public outrage where I'm just angry and I'm in it and I'm talking from a place of anger, right? Yeah, you can probably talk from a place of anger inside of this closed network. We'll figure out a solution, and then we move forward. I think that's the thing. Why places like BNBA is so important, because you want to be able to cultivate that experience, so that, you know what, although I'm a minority, I definitely feel like a majority in this space, and I definitely feel like I can make meaningful differences in this space, because I've been able to pitch to someone that is a younger student right now. I've been able to look at it from a different perspective, when an analyst from the West Coast may say, well, just look at it like this, man, like these are opportunities. And so those things happen inside the organization. I think that's important.
Yeah, I appreciate you bringing up the work being done with the mentorship program. I know that's something that we're really proud of in our mentors. So I appreciate you representing that. And also, too, with our podcast, Beyond the Science, I think we saw this gap in people being able to share their lived experiences. So we've created this platform where stories can really reflect actual lives. because we do know outside of the science's identity, people have personal challenges, experiences, and victories. So we don't just talk ABA. We've been able to bring on a lot of allies, a lot of accomplices, as I would say, and have these real conversations. And then we have this really playful platform that we use as well. Deterrence is actually one of our leads, called ABA Versus, which is really just this unapologetically joyful, culturally forward way that we kind of just bring people together. So the work with DEI doesn't always have to feel heavy, right? We can do it in a way that's playful, in a way that can feel very human, that can feel belonging. So we created this space called ABA Versus Block Party, where we do all these different events to bring the community and do that work. Community challenges, games, mixers. So we've kind of put all these things together to continue to do the work that we've been doing in both a serious way, with a partnership way, but also a very fun way to make it feel not as heavy, because this work, as you guys know, it can be very heavy sometimes. So we try to find that good balance in our initiatives.
And you know what? I will say this, like, I think what you just illustrated beautifully is that there are more things that brings us together that separate us. But a lot of times we forget those things because of the day-to-day, like, blows that you experience. You're like, oh, I do like people. I can't come outside of this.
I agree.
So for block parties, ABA Versus, I will say this: you probably will not see me do like any type of line dance, or I won't have a fan, but I definitely will give you an experience as an AV host.
Yes, you do a great job hosting those mixers and those block parties, Terrence. We all love seeing you, man. Killing it.
Love it. And we'll make sure anything that links and websites or whatever that you guys want us to share out, we can embed it with anybody who is coming back to get their CEU for this. So we'll get all of that information from you guys. Nissa, we're going to continue to do some trainings.
Yes, we did make culturally responsive care free here at the Institute. And what was really fun about that timing was I had just released that course for the Institute team. And we went back to our leadership here at CentralReach, and we're like, look, this is happening. We want you all to be aware of it. This is a very important component of the work that we do. We would like to make this course free to anyone coming to CentralReach, whether they're a customer or not. So we'll continue to do that. And I think, as we all have establishing operations and motivating operations in our work, this is a big one for me. So as someone who's a part of the CR Institute team, this is an area that I'd love to continue to grow. The course was just released, but we would love to bring on more courses, more content, and continue to make it free and affordable for those individuals who are seeking these courses. And I know, these types of courses there aren't a ton of them available. I think there were libraries being built prior to this decision, and I hope that our colleagues that are working on that content continue to build. But this is something that I think we here at CentralReach really want to continue to grow and develop. So that our colleagues can have access.
Yeah,
I was going to ask this, and it may be a little bit off the beaten path. So give me a little latitude. I'm processing it here. Why do you think someone would be against DEI? Why would it be a problem?
That's that we could go all day.
Yeah.
No, but seriously, like why would you not want an inclusive environment? Like, I have internal thoughts. However, I'm very interested to be able to take a different perspective. Why would someone not want it?
Do you want me to answer from some real words I've heard said? I mean, I can do that. I mean, I don't quote anybody or anything, but I really have a lot of contact with people who are I know for a fact that there are people who believe that it's unnecessary, that I am already doing my own work. I am not a racist. This shouldn't be something that is required of me. I feel judged. I feel misclassified when you say this. The words implicit bias are extremely triggering. For that line of defense. And I think a lack of information about what is actually in that content,
Yeah.
there's been a lot of misinformation out there about what there's some sort of political agenda to eliminate white people. Some really silly kinds of ideas are floating around out there in the zeitgeist about what this actually is. And then there's another group that is just straight racism, and they do want to retain power, and it feels threatening when people of other groups might see some of that back for themselves. So we're not in a perfect world yet, and there's probably more people for whom there is a racial motivation in that than we would ever suspect.
I think you did a really nice job, Shannon, of just kind of outlining some of the reasons why people might be against DEI. It's interesting. I've had the opportunity as well to kind of hear from different people. And one thing that I think wasn't mentioned was, minorities, people of color who are, not for the continuation of DEI programs and such, and that actually stemming from a place of one, misinformation, but also just being concerned with having other communities believing that they are not deserving of whatever it is they might have. So just the assumption that, by the existence of DEI initiatives being in place, I'm getting an unfair advantage, which I found very, very interesting. I was kind of taken back because I thought, I think, again, a lot of this really stems from just misinformation, which you mentioned, right? Just not really understanding what DEI truly is and what the guardrails that are in place as a result of having these types of initiatives, ensuring true equity. And so that was just one perspective that I found very interesting, actually going back to my hometown and hearing my neighbors who are minorities, people of color, share that they weren't in support of it because of concerns that, I don't need the unfair advantage, which is just a complete demonstration of not understanding what DEI is.
The one thing that I think are those biases that sit with us, and sometimes we'll put blinders on and say, like, I don't have any bias towards anyone else, but like, if we're truthfully being honest with ourselves, there are those biases. It's when those biases dictate how we make decisions, and the decisions are usually associated with something negative that's going to hurt the minority of the society. And I think that becomes the harder part for other people to realize, like, well, how does what I do on a local level in one organization negatively impact this group of people? Well, I'm providing great service. Well, are you considerate of, like, the small set of people that you allowed it to receive services at your location? Or from an organization, how do you hire? Are you only hiring people that very much look, sound, and act like you? And I think that is where the market becomes a difficult thing to or the DEI, or the idea of DEI is hard to swallow, right? I don't see it. And I'm not doing it. And I'm definitely not a racist. I mean, to the extent of me being a racist, I will say I believe in having, pro-Black men being promoted, right? But that doesn't mean that all of my decision making goes from that particular standpoint, right? I don't think it's hard. It's sometimes hard for people to see that.
Mm.
Yeah.
That came out weird, but okay.
I think the topic of unconscious bias or implicit bias, right? And having done some of that in the course and looking at the lit reviews and what they've done in nursing training and doctoral training, is that when it comes to the type of work we do, and I've had these conversations a ton since the newsletter came out, it's more of that we are impacting clients in so many socially significant ways. Like if we think about working in home, right? You're doing toilet training and feeding, and there are so many variables that contribute to those decisions that we make clinically, that our own biases from our learned history, from what we've seen our parents do, from our own our own humanness in society and how we're treated by others, that does impact our decision making and our clinical judgment. That does, no matter how you slice it. If you are not aware of your own bias, that the thoughts that run through your head and those decisions that have developed because of who you are and where you lived and what has happened to you, if you're not aware of that, you could be making decisions for treatment for someone that could fundamentally injure them. And I've used this example a number of times on this podcast, where I worked with a particular family where they fed their child with their hands. Every meal had to be hand fed, either himself or the parent. And I was a young behavior analyst, so I'm giving myself a little grace, but it was absolutely terrible. I went with the mom, and she and I went back and forth on he needs to use a spoon and a fork. And, it was like, it is in the ables. It's in the AFLs. We need to use a spoon and a fork. And this mom schooled me real quick on, this is our culture. This is how we feed him.
Yeah.
And being a very young, having no training on culturally responsive care, I held my ground. And we finally, after months of disagreement and her speaking to my clinical director, came to the conclusion that, okay, we will work on the hand feeding because it's all in-home based. But when he goes to preschool, we will start using utensils because we're not sure if the daycare providers will hand feed him. But in my youth, I thought, this is what, as the expert, this is what I'm deciding, and this is what we're going to do. So I think, those biases, those beliefs that we have, we need to be aware of them. Even if it's I am wrong here, let me take a step back. That's enough to just say, okay, I'm reflecting on my decisions.
You know what? That is one that sits with my soul, because we practice science, right? We practice behavior analysis, and we get to this point where I remember being a young practitioner. Shannon, I remember it right now.
I remember you being a young practitioner as well.
And I remember feeling like I was going to change the world, and it had to be changed just like this. And now, after I've practiced, the experience tells me you don't necessarily have to be at the finish line right now. You literally can chip away at it day by day. And I think that if we are not educating, and maybe in this walk of my life, I really have a heavy emphasis on being able to change the educational experience of individuals that come from minority backgrounds. And I think I don't remember having that academic background from someone that maybe identified culturally with me.
Yes.
And so that's tough. When we talk about exemplars in your academic training, and how can you pull from that if you've never experienced it, right? And it's tough. And I think that, which is why connecting individuals with other individuals that may not always be in your area, right? The importance of going to conferences, joining an organization that has shared values, being able to talk to people that come from different walks of life is so important within our profession that we sometimes will sleep on it.
I just want to jump in. I really appreciate both of you guys' perspectives. And both of you guys' statements really resonated with me just now, because you guys know I've been doing this work too. And I want to add to that one profession that we really don't talk about enough that's I think is really going to be affected by this are our direct service and our RBTs.
Mm-hmm.
They make up 200,000 plus, right? Mm-hmm. And my hope was, because the BACB announced that the RBTs are going to start needing CEUs as well in 2026. They didn't say when, but they're going to. So I was hoping that DEI was going to transfer over to them, that kind of work, because they need that more than ever as well, because they're going into the homes, they're doing this. So one thing that we've done as well, we've gone ahead and created a space for RBTs. We created a conference for them. I'm not even sure when this episode is being released, but on May 3rd, we're having a virtual conference for RBTs to express all the things that we're talking about now, but they don't sometimes get a voice.
Yeah.
And they're the ones doing a lot of the work. So we've created the space for them to come on and talk about things like we're talking about today, but from their perspective, because this also affects them. This affects the work that they do as well. So I just wanted to give a quick shout out to them. They don't always get a voice. And we created this space for them to come and talk. So I hope that some of our listeners would join us there, because there are not a lot of spaces created for them to voice maybe their frustrations around these things and other things in our field as well.
As a clinical supervisor, the one thing that, as you said, something just clicked in my head. And there was an experience that I had in which someone that identified in a minority group went into a home, and within 30 minutes of that person being there, a phone call, no, he cannot be here. He does not, and I start to think like, man, at least, there are like, I have to come in contact with people on a smaller level than what a RBT would.
Yeah.
But imagine having to be in a home in which someone doesn't like you for 25 plus hours. Like, that would be horrible.
Yeah.
That would be absolutely like, no, I would definitely quit. Like, I don't know if I had that experience, would I be the same practitioner that I am today? I'm almost certain I would have ran from behavior analysis so quick.
I can't even imagine. And, one of the things that was coming to my mind as you guys were sharing your stories is people who are scared or offended by the idea of things like implicit bias could be happening inside of me. It's racial tensions through the majority of my life living in the Deep South have been black, white, black, white, black, white. And more now, there is also this tension with Hispanic Americans as well, migrants who may not have citizenship, people not speaking English. And the thing about it is, it's not that you're going to be taught, and this is one of the big ones that's out there in the zeitgeist that I think scares people. We're not teaching you and your children that you are bad and evil. Quite the opposite. What we are teaching you is a framework for how to look at yourself and to know what other people are experiencing when they're looking at you. Because you, more than likely, if you need this service, you more than likely are going to have a person of color in your house. And don't you want them to be able to look at you and your culture and to figure out how they should be working with your child so that they fit into your culture as well? I mean, it's a really good point that most of the providers who are coming in are not from what is currently the dominant culture in the United States.
And be able to have discussions where, like, I'm explaining this, and I probably want to make sure that I'm explaining it in a culturally sensitive and accepting way. Because even in our session notes, we can sometimes put things that on the outward looking in becomes very offensive, because we just don't know. And you don't know because you hadn't had exposure. You never had maybe you never had a supervisor that was attentive to the details, and those things come. And to be quite frank, when you are in spaces where from the highest office in the land, it is like, yeah, there are never mind.
Got you on the AIC Airways.
Yeah. I have the right to shut up from time to time.
But real quick, Deterrence, I will say though, when you ask Shannon the question about why somebody would be opposed to DEI, and Shannon, I appreciate you sharing this. I know you have a post.
My perspective, yeah.
I appreciate that, but I also would like to have those conversations. I want to have those conversations, and Deterrence, I hope I'm not dropping the bomb right now, but Deterrence is also part of ABA Versus, and we've also created this space called Civil Discourse that we're going to be launching pretty soon. And we're bringing it to conferences. Right now, we're starting it virtually, but we want to bring on people with different perspectives, and we want to have these conversations for people who are willing to. And we're going to have trained moderators. It's hard to be a moderator. But we've been really intrigued with this, and we've been building this for a long time because we want to have these conversations to hopefully also understand and grow together as a community. So
I think we can teach so many people. That's amazing.
Yeah. It's a great concept. I'm hoping to see this again at conferences and the like, where we can just have people come on and have civil discourse and have somebody moderate it. And, we don't have to all agree, but at least I hear your perspective and I can maybe try to understand it. So Deterrence is going to be one of our moderators on those segments that we're doing. And so I just appreciate being in the room and have conversations with people who may feel differently. And I may not agree, but at least I can try to understand where you're coming from and what your learning history is like and what you may have come into contact with to understand what we're talking about.
I love that. I love that. I think it makes so much a difference when it's one-to-one and you actually know a human being who's being affected in a certain way. I think that brings great opportunities for change. Love hearing that.
Yeah.
I didn't answer the question originally, but I'm going to answer it now. I was horrified. And like you, Jeron, a lot of it had to do with the process, but also I'm having this crisis of who are we in my mind. And I've had to avoid as much as possible saying too many things about the political climate of our country. I have kind of walked out there several episodes ago, though I'll do it a little bit more now. Going all the way back to 2016, I've been having this like crisis of who are we in the United States of America? Who are we as human beings? Who are we as people? And seeing some of the ugly underbelly of thoughts that people feel about each other and about groups of people, and with no personal experience at all, just to write off whole groups of people based on some random characteristic that's been chosen. I felt like we made so much progress in the US, and then starting around 2016, you start seeing that walk back. I had some comfort that I worked in a field where we were taking that seriously and we were really, really trying to make a difference. And when Elizabeth, you say something about that socially significant behavior, what could be more socially significant than what we are dealing with as a whole population right here, right now? And when they walked that back, it was so deflating, absolutely deflating.
I agree.
We need to know who we are.
No, I was just saying to Shannon's point, like I would argue to find a more diverse field of individuals, but practitioners work within our field, which begs the need for this notion that we need to have this in place. And I'm not sure if we're short on time here. And Elizabeth, I appreciate your points, but I'm curious for everybody that's on here now, when they spoke about the funding issue, particularly at the state level and the federal level, when funding was going to be pooled. I'm curious how everybody feels about that part. So when they said that was what it was, what do we feel like? And I want you guys' thoughts on what would be the answer at that point when universities then couldn't be able to potentially teach some coursework. What are you guys' thoughts on that?
I think that there are power of decision making within a few, and it reigns supreme over all of us. Unfortunately, I don't know any politicians in those particular, and I think if we're being transparent, we need to know what states. And so if we're going to make real meaningful change and real socially significant change, tell us those states so that way we can direct our anger to the states that are, not doing, or and if it's in some of those more conservative states, let us then support though, like let us rally around those states as a profession to be able to support it. So if it is, and I'm just for the sake of the name, if it's it's happening in Texas, or if it's happening in a more conservative state, allow us to then go and share our voices at those particular places rather than, I guess going where we know it's going to jive well.
Mm.
Yeah. Just something I wanted to add, kind of thinking about just this topic overall and, answering what maybe could have been done differently. I was really curious about what other governing bodies do when changing policies, because, I wanted to be sensitive to, what is the norm, right? Like what is required of organizations like the BACB and other organizations. We have the APA and kind of digging into that a little bit, I found like the APA does have a process where they involve public calls for feedback. They have task forces where, the rationale and opportunity for people that are affected by these decisions to speak up are provided. And so I think this is, in terms of moving forward with what I'm hoping to see from the BACB moving forward, in response to this, would actually be just a little bit more transparency, and maybe reevaluating the process as it relates to this, but all issues maybe that are this big, right? At least my initial reading of 12 subject matter experts, which is great, but I don't know who they are. I think this isn't going to be the last time that there are big policy changes that affect the community of professionals and the clients that we serve. So it kind of just surfaced for me. What can we maybe push for in terms of just process policy changes from them as a whole? So just a thought. There's other governing bodies that have to roll out similar changes, and they're able to do it in a more transparent and systematic way where everyone's looped in.
And then you also have to look at it like, we didn't realize that infrastructure, even in our science, is not solid. It's very liquid. And the infrastructure for social climate and adjustments to social change is just tough. And one being is when you are getting political pressures from the highest office in the land to do away with certain things. This won't be the first time that this happened, and it probably,
Right.
and I would venture to say that this has happened more. It's almost like the pendulum switches. We go from, there's no like even middle, we're gonna find a way to make it work. But when the pendulum switches and it's very, very tight on being inclusive, how do we support that change? Not only as an individual practitioner, but as a governing body and as a science. It is our duty and a responsibility, and I don't know what others do. I don't know what psychologists or individuals in medicine may do, but they may have some tips and strategies that may make it easier.
Jeron, am I right in thinking that you've already done some of that research?
Yeah, so I mean, what we did, and Elizabeth, I know you kind of mentioned that as well. We kind of did some research in resolving with the process in which things were disseminated and how it was disseminated, as well as we went and did a deep dive into the statements and the language that people were using as well. And I have to say that some of these organizations are standing 10 toes deep in what they do value, and aren't afraid to use what some people call trigger words. So that was really interesting that some comments were made saying that we were following suit of other organizations where, I mean, Google is free, the web is free. You can kind of get on there and see that there's a lot of organizations that are still have certain language in there supporting their need for diversity, equity, and inclusion. So, yeah. I just wanted to echo what Elizabeth said. This won't be the last time it's happened. So maybe we can learn from some organizations and create a different framework for how this is disseminated in the process. So maybe we're all not feeling these feelings that we're feeling now.
Yeah. And I think some of the organizations that I know Dr. Natalie Parks has posted something on one of her kind of newsletters on some of the different adjacent medical fields, ASHA, APA. I think a week after the APBA conference, APA, the American Psychological Association, did come out and retract their DEI statement, saying that they also had evaluated and considered. They did share a little more in terms of how the decision was made, as well as why, that they would continue to reevaluate and support as long as they could ensure that funding was in place for psychologists. And I followed on LinkedIn. I have a lot of psychologist friends who were also up in arms and very upset, as we are, with this decision, because of the fact that mental health does require a culturally responsive and contextualistic evaluation. There are other, our colleagues that are speech and language pathologists, they have doubled down. So they are 100% continuing to maintain their stance and their perspective.
And it all comes down to funding, right? If we're just being honest, that's really what a lot of this comes down to, is funding, and funding being pulled. That is the backbone of a lot of these organizations. So that is a tough call. When Deterrence, you're talking about, you're getting pressures from the highest up to pull certain things when that's where a lot of your funding is coming from. That makes it a challenge.
But you're telling me that the majority can use public policy to negatively impact the minority? Oh, wow.
All right, we're not going to be too political, but we will just go on and say, if you haven't been voting, now's the time to reconsider that decision if you've been affected. All right, I would like to stay here all day and maybe into the night, but I know that I can't require that of all of you. So let's do the last secret word. How about upset? Upset, UPSET. And again, we will share resources, links to courses that we have that are addressing. We have more than the one, so we will provide all of that. We will provide everything that Deterrence and Jeron have suggested to us today. Anything else that comes to mind as we're producing this episode, if you guys want to share that out, we will. It does come out before May 3rd, so we'll go ahead and get that information on the RBT conference as well.
You know what, Jeron, there was actually sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but there was a talk that we did way before this that when we talked about the intersection or the inner, help me out. Yeah.
Yeah, intersectionality and behavior analysis. Terrence, you hosted that panel. I definitely recommend people go listen to that. It was about 2 months ago. It's on Behavior Live. Really, really good listen. Some really good voices on there. John Capel of the world. So great panel to listen to talking about some of these very same issues. Thanks for plugging that, Deterrence.
Yeah. Flood us with all of those links and we'll share them out. All right. Well, I'm going to close it up for now. So thank you to everyone who is here. And thanks to those of you who cared enough about this topic to sit and engage with us and listen. We want to hear feedback from you. So use those course review forms to let us know, or just email any of us directly if you want more information or if there's something that you think you want to say to us. But for now, I'm going to sign us off. Thanks for joining us on the Behavioral View, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for joining us for the Behavioral View. Ready to lock in your CEU? Just follow the link below, complete the quiz, and enter the secret words. It's that easy. You've already done the work, so why not take the credit? Subscribe and join us for the next episode. We'll see you soon.